And next on stage, I would request Mr. Anurag Mathur to come on. Anurag is a partner at PwC for Strategy Plus as well.
Guys, set up the morning fairly well. Also, the distinction of India very, very visible in the kind of conversation. Some very excited, pointed solutions that you guys are trying to build, and I'm hopeful, like Murli said, that you will be all unicorns or true unicorns with genuine business valuations as well. From when I look at it, we get the chance of doing what I do, get the chance to work with a lot of large retail companies, a lot of large online players, as well as a fair number of startups. So I think what I wanted to start with and put together is really just some trends in perspective, both from a consumer standpoint as well as just large changes that we are seeing, which is driving what we believe the entire online to offline or offline to online. And conveniently, people have started calling it O2O because they're not sure which way it's going, right? Is it the online guys moving offline, or is it the offline guys moving online? And looking towards it. But I think before we go there, just as PwC, we've been looking at mega trends globally and looking at it with a 30,000 feet view to life to say that what are the big things that are impacting our lives, right? And if we look at these mega trends and look at how they're impacting our lives and how they're impacting consumers, right? There are 5 big trends that we are calling out. There is clearly demographic and social change, and this is very differently reflected in the rest of the world as it reflects in India. The rest of the world is looking at an aging population, is looking at saying, how do we deal with 100-year people? In the last, I think, 1 month, I've read 3 different articles. One saying 60 is the new 40, one saying 70 is the new 40, and another from Japan trying to say that why can't we get retirement ages up to 75 years, right? So there is, that's what the world is facing, right? What we are facing in India is 25-year and below at 60%, and a surge of millennials that companies don't know how to deal with, a surge of legacy brands who believe that they are very well suited for the market currently, but they don't know what to do with this, the consumption bucket that's coming. So large change, right? And we'll talk a little more about that. Accelerating urbanization, impacting globally in a very large way. Mega cities are driving a lot of the consumption, driving a lot of the where retail goes, where consumer goes. But in India, more specifically, if you look at urbanization, it's not just, of course, it's driving the big cities. And I heard, Bidar and Hubli are now being taken as almost urban centers, if I can say. But not just the Bangalore or the Bombay or Delhi, which of course they are, but even towns like Lucknow, towns like Banaras, towns like Hubli possibly, where people are coming in from parts and building, and they are used to what he's trying to solve for as wholesale box, right? They are used to the unorganized trade. They're used to non-branded business, and they go by trust, right? They look at the brands, they look at business and say that, I know where to buy from because I trust this retailer, right? Or I trust X person who produces. But when you come to an urban city and you don't trust anybody, what do? Right? You go for a brand. Now, this is the chance where India is building brands. This is where companies are looking to say, and this one of the largest shifts happening in the consumer business is from the organized to unorganized segment, driven by urbanization, right? And we'll talk more again about that. Climate change and resource scarcity. Again, this is something that, and we've seen this for many years appearing. Climate change is real. Yes, large issue in the world. Does it really bother India? Does it really bother the consumer goods and retail business? If you would ask me 2 years back, I would have said no, right? Even a year back, I would have said, frankly, the Indian consumer gives nothing about sustainability, right? They are not willing to change habits and practices on sustainability. Today, I would say plastic is probably one of the top 3 issues bothering the minds of the CEOs in every other business in retail and consumer, right? They are thinking about it because consumers are thinking about it. Consumers are willing to change their buying patterns and practices and because of that, right? In India today, fair trade happened. A lot of things happened in Europe, in US, in Western markets. Indian consumers couldn't really bother about where it's coming from, right? But today, that sustainable practice, that change, that is impacting the Indian consumer, and I would say that it will go dramatically over the next 5 years, right? Technological breakthroughs, of course, a lot of you here have used these technological breakthroughs to create point solutions and solve for problems that the big companies have not been able to solve for. Right? So each of these can be built, as I spoke about. I mean, if you look at the global population groups, right? globally large aging societies, right? Very, very large share that's going to be of the 65 plus age group. And I think the reason I put this up is that while we look at this from a global standpoint and we look at the India curve and see that there is a really small percentage there and a very large chunk sitting in the less than 24 bucket, right? 50% below 25 years of age. If I take it up to 28, 29, it's probably 60%, right? So the question, however, is that given 120 billion people, right, do we not have an aging population at all? Well, guess what? We have a 14% population that's in the 65 plus age group. And we are probably the one country in the world that has no solutions for them, right? There is very, very little of what's been solved for. If you look at the Western markets, there is a lot of solutions already in place in society, whether it's food, whether it's nutrition, whether it's electronic products, whether it's mobile phones, whether it's simply accessibility, there is a lot of them. So I think the point is that fundamentally in India, any direction you look, there is opportunity, right? There is, it's about where can you create a viable business. I don't think that, and if you look at the total size of retail in this country, 850 billion is the number published. You could be off by 50 billion here and there and not, bat an eyelid, because frankly that, and with all estimates, we are growing by anywhere from 12% to 18%, right? At an aggregate with the entire group of 800 billion mom and pop stores taken, we are growing at least 10 to 12%, right? What that means is we are adding $80 billion a year to this business, consumer retail, every year, right? And at 80 billion, what's the size of the largest retailer in this country? Less than $2 billion in a single format, single brand, right? And we are adding 80 billion a year. So I think the squabble is not really about whether it's the offline players winning, whether it's the online players winning. Well, it's about 80 billion getting added. Who's getting that and who's getting a share of that, right? Who's building the business? Who has the right proposition to be able to take what the consumer is spending, right? And I think that's the big sort of I want to focus on saying that it is not about whether it'll go online or whether it'll go offline. It is about the proposition. Talk more about that. Shifts in economic power, reduced Western dominance. Again, how does it impact the business? Well, I can tell you today that the number of conversations that we have in the last 2 years of global players wanting to enter India, global players wanting to look at India, I mean, this is by far currently, even with the lower GDP number that we are reporting, we are still the highest growing market in the world, right? And you can challenge, and there is a lot of challenge to the ease of doing business, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's ugly. It's improving. It may not be improving as fast as what we would like it to be. But the fact is that it's a market that people can't ignore. And you're seeing the change. Today, I mean, if I look at fashion as a business, right? I mean, India is sitting in the middle of the production bowl of the world. All of fashion for the world is produced between Bangladesh, Vietnam, China, India, right? Everything, all shoes, all apparel, everything, it's produced here, right? Some of that is shifting to saying that we want to do customization, we want to do things, we'll move to the US. But India is sitting in the middle of that opportunity, and people are saying that, okay, we want to shift more and more towards India. We are, of course, sitting in the middle of technology bucket. We are sitting in a market where every retailer wants to enter. We are sitting in a market where every other consumer goods, I mean, over the last 2-3 years, I think we've seen players from, I would say, smaller markets like Turkey. Of course, the big boys are already coming in here, but there are players from markets like Turkey, players from markets in Eastern Europe, players from markets in even South America, looking at saying that we can't ignore India. We want to know what's happening in the market. Can we come and look at this market, right? And which will only help to increase, which will increase competition, will also help solve for a lot of problems, right? The 80 billion market is up for taking every year. Somebody has to take it. If we don't take it, somebody else will, right? Of course, a large chunk of emerging markets from, I think, again, China is a market that we can't ignore, right? There is a very clear, yes, it might be growing slower, it might be building stuff, but a lot of our supplier bases, a lot of our production bases, a lot of our thinking bases, and I think the comparisons that we've been making between India and China, a lot of the back end of retail, even for India, is moving to China. And I would hazard that, at wholesale box, you can look at the opportunity of sourcing from China for suppliers sooner than later. There is enough of B2B companies who move that path, right? Who've said that, yes, great opportunity here, but even cheaper opportunity there, we can benefit consumers even more. the shift to the shift from the Western world to these economies, they've created larger and larger factories at lower and lower cost per unit, creating an opportunity to buy for everybody, right? So, impacting business here. Rise of megacities I already spoke about. If you look at urban consumption in India, and if you look at just our top 10 cities, it is still driving close to 55 to 60% of consumption. There is a very, and again, if you look at the story of, and there is a story of many Indias, but I have a simple belief in the rich India, middle India, poor India. There are very clearly three buckets that build out. Rich India growing very fast, growing very differently. Middle India, really the bulk of it with almost 800 million people, which is, again, growing fast, but very different needs and very different pockets. Cannot be looked as one market, has to be looked at different markets, has to be looked at different islands. Opportunity. And poor India, which is probably some of the poorest in the world, and they have to be looked at like the bottom of the pyramid solutions that you build for anywhere else in the world. Right? But the rise of megacities, while it's seeing this inflation, there is a lot of concentration, especially with retail. We are seeing that while the first, or in fact not just the first, but even the current wave of online is driving towards saying that tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 markets which didn't have access are getting access, and that's driving a lot of the growth. But it's also about a lot of the urban cities are driving, their needs are driven by convenience, right? What was great at 8 hours of delivery was then great at 4 hours of delivery, was then great at 2 hours of delivery. Today people are not willing to wait half an hour, right? They're willing to pay for saying that, give it to me in half an hour. The most successful food model in the world for fresh is a half an hour delivery model. Right? The most profitable food model in the world is a half an hour delivery model, works only in cities, right? Ocado. So in terms of the expectations, you cannot look at a city dweller or a large city dweller in the same manner that you look at a small city dweller. And the consumption and the size that's coming. Yesterday I was seeing some very interesting growth charts from companies adding new stores. And there were a couple of companies there are companies who are adding 60 to 80 stores in a year in one city. And in that 80 stores, they've managed to add 74 profitable stores in one single city. And this is in India, in Delhi, right? And I think the question really is that, are we really saturating, or are we getting too bogged by the overall opportunity? Because what I see a lot of companies doing is saying that, India, we can cover everything, let's go open 500 stores all over the country, and then they fold back because neither can they find real estate, nor can they find the right proposition. They dilute everything that they're standing for, and they're building down back, right? So, thing to think about. Resources I spoke about, I think probably best typified by the Prime Minister's Independence Day speech. Water, number one concern in this country. Drinking water, packaged water, followed by plastic. Both of them will become very, very large concerns, driving consumer habits, driving consumer behaviors, driving, and it's already happened across the world, right? There is a very large chunk of the conscious consumer who's driving packaging, who's driving where you source from, who's driving farmer-led pictures on packaging to say, I want to know traceability and I want to know exactly where I'm getting what from. And to the point you mentioned on spinach, and the same, there is a fair number of vegetables, and I've seen along the coast of the Yamuna in Delhi, a lot of watermelon that grows, a lot of the other vegetables that grow exactly there, right? And I've met in the last month 5 organic players who started up in Delhi exactly solving for that problem, right? And there is a large enough market to be able to solve it, to be able to build for. It is something that we'll solve for. Technological breakthroughs, I think, don't need to build. This is a generation that is always on. It is a generation that is clearly, everything is mobile, right? There isn't an alternate option from, I can't even go so far as to saying from breakfast onwards. From waking up onwards, I think people wake up to an alarm of a phone. They start checking WhatsApp or Facebook or Insta, depending on your age group broadly, and every morning, and go from there, right? I remember a couple of years back at one of the conferences, the Shop Clues co-founder, Radhika Agarwal, she spoke about this very interesting term that they had coined, or an opportunity that they've captured, called commute commerce, right? which was essentially saying that people in the morning for an hour and people in the evening for an hour when they're on the road, they figured they're shopping the most that time on their mobiles for them. They actually changed their offering. They changed what they were offering at that time to suit that time at the mobile, at commute, right? So I think finding pockets of opportunity even within the always on is really the question. And again, the numbers of TV viewing time versus mobile viewing time, by far mobile is offshooting TV. TV times are down to 80 minutes and less. Mobile times are upwards of 130 minutes in a day. So there is a clear divergence happening. All of that is, of course, a mix of, so the media boys will say it's still 50-50 because some of that is work time, et cetera, et cetera. But fact is, directionally, it's only going one way, right? And there isn't too many people in the room who I can count on who've seen that much TV, I'm sure. How many of you have actually seen an hour or more of TV a day? Every day for the last week. An hour and more of mobile phone usage. Yeah, exactly the point, right? So we are an always-on generation. It will move there, build towards that. Every category is moving online. We spoke about, I think 2011 is when I started talking about digital to Indian clients. There was a lot of challenge about fresh. There was a lot of challenge about fashion to say, guys, this is not moving online. Who will buy fashion online? I mean, you know, Indian consumer, they want to touch and feel everything. It's not going to go, right? 3 years later, 30% of the business was online for a large chunk of companies. Electronics moved to 30%, fashion moved to 10, 11, but these are aggregate numbers. When you look at specific companies, they move in very large chunks online. Now, fresh is something they're building. So categories will move online. The fact is that there is a degree of convenience, there is a degree of benefit that clearly the online world is providing, which the offline world needs to learn from and link towards. In the last 3 years, a lot of the offline world has woken up to this, and they are planning for it, preparing for it. I would still say that, and I see that in the solutions that came this morning as well, right, that most of the innovation in this space, you look at the consumer journey, look at how consumers doing, find where the problem is being faced. Largely, it's startup companies who are solving from the problem of that, creating a business behind that. Look at the big company, they are waiting to say, can we go from A to B to C to D, or can we just buy 4 of these guys when they get created, and then we'll solve and create a problem, solve for the problem, right? So there is, you're looking at the categories moving online, but you're waiting to really act and react to that. Online is moving offline, clearly, and it's not an Indian phenomenon, it's a global phenomenon. Online is moving offline globally. Very different reasons in India, I believe, to what's happening across the world. In India, the largest retail footprint, or largest retailer with the largest footprint before online hit was Bata, probably, with 1,500 stores or so. I don't think anybody else had that kind of penetration with 500, 600 cities, right? In a country of 5,400 districts, if you're in 600 cities, you're by far under-penetrated, right? But that was the most penetrated retailer in the country. So the question is that as you look to go into these geographies, as you look to build, you can do online, you can build, but there is a long way for offline to go as well. There is a lot of physical retail presence that can be built in this country and will be built in this country to solve the problems. And of course, building a brand online has become more and more expensive. Customer acquisition costs have, and a lot of you are startups, you know what customer acquisition costs are like. It is probably easier to put up a flagship store, even with the exorbitant rentals that my real estate friends here will debate. But even with that, it is probably cheaper to build some of those, right? Nonetheless, offline guys have moved online, have tried to put in. And I think a lot of the movement is also happening in where the offline guys are saying, okay, we need to use the store as an online front. How can we, whether it's virtual mirrors, whether it's endless aisles, whether it's, he says it is about saying that how do we offer this seamless technology? Because ultimately you're solving for the consumer's problem, not online, offline. You're solving for the proposition of saying that you want, you know, in fashion, they want their size at any time, wherever they've come to shop. Whether it's through an endless aisle, whether it's through an online solution, whether it's through an offline solution, well, the consumer doesn't care, as long as you can say that your size will be available when you want it, right? So that's the things that retailers are solving for. And I think, again, busy slide number, but broad message is this, that the digital journey in India is just about beginning. There is a lot of to go. The depth and penetration of this is getting steeper and steeper and steeper. Today already we are talking about 500 million plus smartphones. We are talking about time spent on mobiles that's going up. We are already talking about the cheapest per GB data costs in the world, going down further. If you heard Mr. Mani's speech at the AGM recently, you'll probably looking at video to voice ratios also changing very dramatically if all that he promises comes to life. So, and backed up by the government solutions, the interaction is moving. Now, what is this doing? What this is doing is simply this, that all of these trends are eventually leading to a very significant shift in the consumer's mindset, right? And I'll spend 5 minutes talking about these, right? Value focus, we are aware of Indian consumer clearly very, very value focused, aware of global fashion and styles, need accessible fast fashion, but they want value, right? And they are not going away from value. There is a clear market. The best performing guys are either in the value market or in the athleisure market. Right now, the guys who are stuck in the middle, losing a lot of sheen. Right? The second largest trend that I see, which is building again from some of these, broadly bucketed as health and wellness, but eat good, look good, feel good. It's driving the consumer towards whether it's wearables, whether it's healthy food, whether it's wearing slim fits, whether it is buying electronic gadgets that can count steps and get better and better at heartbeats and resting heart rates and further, but moving towards that, right? So impacting all businesses. Personalization, again, something that is enabled by technology and something that consumers are looking for more and more. Nike announced 2 years back that they did a custom shoe. They created their first factory in the West, in Mexico, Guatemala, trying to deliver a shoe in 24 hours, custom made to San Francisco. And this is what they are doing because their closest competitor, Under Armour, was shooting them off on the business, right? And they have created, and they are not, if I remember correctly, from their investor reports, their CEO made a statement saying that I'm not doing this for a fad. I'm going to create $1 billion business out of this in 2 years' time, right? So it is something that's here, that's at scale, that will stay. We're seeing Cadbury do some very interesting work in India on this. You can buy chocolates with your name on it, and many other companies, some of them scaling towards. While at the same time, the rich India is looking at all of these last three, right? They are saying we want healthier stuff, we want the cranberry and the omega seeds, and we want the premiumization of food, of fashion, of well-traveled, well-heeled people. They want that market, right? But people are picking urban niches and picking pieces of them. So all four of these, believe, are large, and price points are finally rising, including service, right? And I want you to reflect back and think only 5, maybe 7, 8 years back. What was the price of a male haircut that any of you paid here, right? It's probably close to $100, and at $100 you cribbed about it, right? Saying it used to be $20. Today, most of you pay $500 and upwards and don't bat an eyelid, and several of you, not me, don't have that much, pay $1,500 plus and don't bat an eyelid, right? And there was a price for an AC installation in this country not more than 10 years back. When the company used to say, we'll charge you $500, you went to a local retailer and said, ₹250 mein laga dunga, frame theek hoga, I will do it, right? And most consumers used to buy it. Today, they go to the same company and say, I'll pay you $2,000, but I don't want a line on my wall, right? So there is a premium desire, a desire to better things that is moving as well for the urban consumer. Shaped by new channels. I think the quick point I will make here is, and I can't emphasize this more, is the whole best in class anywhere. I think the mistake, if I can say, that I see so often companies making is they continue to look at only their category, only their business, right? If you play in the electronics space, you compare to other electronics guys. If you play in the fashion space, or if you pay women's ethnic fashion, you compare yourself to women's ethnic fashion. Well, consumers are not comparing like that. They are saying, if an Uber app is so convenient and so interesting for me to use, so should yours be. Whether, whatever you do. It doesn't matter to me whether you're a fashion player, whether you're an electronics player, or whether you're a transportation player. I want best in class everywhere. If the Starbucks barista treats me very nicely, has a great conversation, great consumer service. If I call an Amex helpline, it has great. Why can't you guys do the same? Doesn't matter which business you're in, right? It is a best-in-class everywhere requirement. I think it's built. Of course, some of these we'll talk about further. More open to new again. So how many of you know that the Me brand, they do cell phones, right? They do mobile phones. How many of you know they do shoes? You're wearing one? Fantastic, right? And they are one of the largest selling brands on the online space. I mean, how many times would you go to a company or think about somebody saying that you're a phone brand, why don't you extend into shoes? I mean, as a consultant, I would be shocked, right? To say, guys, what are you talking about? So, but that's what a consumer is open to. They are saying that, okay, we saw this brand, we are trusted, and that's the change and the difference of the millennial, right? It is not a legacy-based population. They are looking at trying anything new. So, well, moving here, I won't spend too much time on this. There is a very interesting panel. I want to get some of these conversations with the panel. I think this is really, and this is available online on the PwC site. This is a global retail survey that we do. Some of the interesting pieces that came out this year, I think social media, of course, environmentally friendly packaging. I think the other interesting thing that I've seen is that, so this survey is done across about 43,000 consumers across the world, 38 countries. We do it every year, so I see the trends every year. Last 2 years onwards, we are seeing 90% plus people shopping on Amazon. Not really a dramatic thing anymore, I would say. But the interesting thing to me is that for the last 2 years, what I'm seeing is, last year, 10% of people said they start their search journey on Amazon, not on Google, not on a search engine. This year, the number's gone up to 16%, right? So it's a very interesting, very different thing that I believe is happening and will continue to impact the market in a very, very significant way. These are all leading to changes. And I think what I want to talk about with the panel as well, clearly, the store footprint is evolving, right? People are evaluating, innovating the store footprint to counter with it. They're looking at saying, should we do small format neighborhood markets? Guys like IKEA who've never experienced a small format store are looking at that. They're closing a lot of stores. They're trying to say, can we do kiosk models? And that's one of the things I'm very keen to talk to our real estate folks about, is saying that, is that something that really in India, building inventory-free showrooms, ever-increasing levels of convenience, curbside pickups, autonomous deliveries, pickup lockers. A lot of this we are already seeing. You're seeing Bangalore's at probably the market at the helm of this. A lot of technology throughout the network, inside stores, beacons, AI-enabled planogramming, genuine things that we are seeing Indian retailers do, which, 5 years back, and I've been trying to peddle digital to this market from 2011 when people used to tell me, Anurag, you're talking about stuff that's Western, it's not really in our market, why are you talking about this? And in 2014, 2011, they all told me it's not happening. And the pace of change hit all of these companies so much. In 2014, I couldn't keep my phone down, saying the same companies were calling me to say, what were you talking about? What's happening? We don't know what's hit us, right? So and I think that's the beauty of India, that the pace of change that's happening is going to be very, very rapid, and it's going to be very, very visible. I think the last point that I'll make here is really just this, that the curves, right? The curves have changed dramatically. Digital has led to the cost curve shifting, especially for global markets, where where digital has shifted what your profit curve and your cost curve was. In India, given the number of established retailers was very little, that impact has not been felt as much, but the base curve is being built in a very different manner. And a lot of people are struggling to see the investments that they are making reflected in margin growth. There is a lot of build towards saying that will they be able to make money from all the investments that they are doing. The number of closures of large groups, large brands, I think in the last probably year, I've seen more than one fashion retailer go down every month. Large brand names, more than one fashion retailer every month going bankrupt, right? And just 3 summary points. It is critical to get the proposition right. It is not just about online to offline. It is critical to get the experience right of what you're offering, how you're offering, what's the journey to be thinking across end-to-end experience, and it is critical to execute with excellence. And happy to talk about all of these in more detail at any point of time, but time, happy to connect and build, but I would love to call the panel and get some of their thoughts on this.